Imagine driving down a desolate stretch of highway, the sun sinking low on the horizon, when suddenly your car sputters to a stop, the fuel gauge hovering dangerously close to empty. With nowhere to turn and the darkness closing in around you, you find yourself face to face with a nightmare scenario, stranded in the middle of nowhere with no gas in sight. These terrifying true out-of-gas horror stories will send shivers down your spine and leave you questioning the safety of the open road. Today we will talk about 5 horrifying true out-of-gas horror stories. So before we start, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. 1. The Abandoned Highway. It was a moonless night when Sarah found herself driving down a lonely highway, the only car for miles in either direction. As she pressed on, the fuel gauge in her car began to drop lower and lower until finally, with a sputter and a groan, the engine gave out, leaving her stranded in the darkness. With no cell service and no other cars in sight, Sarah was forced to venture out into the night in search of help. But as she walked along the deserted highway, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes followed her every move from the shadows. As the hours passed and the darkness deepened, Sarah began to hear strange noises echoing through the night, a soft whispering that seemed to emanate from the very air around her. Terrified, she quickened her pace, desperate to find shelter before whatever lurked in the darkness could find her. Just when Sarah thought she couldn't go on any longer, she stumbled upon an abandoned gas station, its lights flickering weakly in the night. With a sense of relief washing over her, she hurried inside, only to find that the building was empty, the shelves barren, and the pumps long since dry. With no cell service and no other cars in sight, Sarah was forced to venture out into the night in search of help. But as she walked along the deserted highway, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes followed her every move from the shadows. Terrified, she quickened her pace, desperate to find shelter before whatever lurked in the darkness could find her. Just when Sarah thought she couldn't go on any longer, she stumbled upon an abandoned gas station, its lights flickering weakly in the night. With a sense of relief washing over her, she hurried inside, only to find that the building was empty, the shelves barren, and the pumps long since dry. As the realization sunk in that she was truly alone in the darkness, Sarah huddled in a corner of the abandoned gas station, praying for the first light of dawn to chase away the shadows and bring an end to her nightmare. But little did she know, the horrors of the abandoned highway were far from over, and the true terror was yet to come. 2. The Haunted Backroads. When Mark's car ran out of gas on a deserted back road, he knew he was in for a long night. With no other option but to wait for help to arrive, he settled in for the night, hoping that dawn would bring salvation. But as the darkness closed in around him, Mark began to hear strange noises coming from the woods that lined the road, soft footsteps, low whispers, and the occasional sound of branches snapping underfoot. Terrified, he locked himself in his car, praying for morning to come quickly. But as the hours passed and the noises grew louder, Mark realized that he was not alone, that something sinister lurked in the darkness just beyond the edge of the road. With nowhere to run and no one to turn to, he huddled in his car, waiting for the first light of dawn to chase away the shadows and bring an end to his nightmare. 3. The Vanishing Gas Station. When Emily's car ran out of gas on a deserted stretch of highway, she pulled into the nearest gas station, grateful for the chance to refuel and get back on the road. But as she approached the pump, she realized that something was terribly wrong. The gas station was empty, the pumps rusted and dry, and the building itself crumbling to dust. Confused and frightened, Emily turned to leave, only to find that the road behind her had vanished, leaving her stranded in the middle of nowhere with no way out. With nowhere to turn and the darkness closing in around her, she was forced to spend the night in the abandoned gas station, praying for morning to come quickly and bring an end to her nightmare. 4. The Phantom Hitchhiker. It was a stormy night when Jake found himself driving down a remote country road, the rain pounding against his windshield and the wind howling through the trees. With his fuel gauge hovering dangerously close to empty, he knew he needed to find a gas station soon. But as he rounded a bend in the road, he saw a figure standing on the side of the road, a hitchhiker, drenched and shivering in the pouring rain. Despite the warnings echoing in his mind, Jake couldn't bear to leave the stranger stranded in the storm. He pulled over and offered the hitchhiker a ride. But as soon as the stranger climbed into the car, a sense of unease settled over Jake like a heavy blanket. As they drove on in silence, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that the hitchhiker was not what he seemed. And when they reached the next town and Jake pulled into the gas station, he was horrified to discover that the hitchhiker had vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a lingering sense of dread. 5. The sinister roadside rest stop. When Amy's car ran out of gas on a deserted stretch of highway, she pulled into a roadside rest stop, hoping to find help or at least some shelter from the biting cold. But as she stepped out of her car and made her way towards the restrooms, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes followed her every move from the shadows. As she entered the dimly lit building, the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and a chill ran down her spine. Strange graffiti covered the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. Terrified, Amy hurried back to her car, desperate to escape the sinister rest stop and the darkness that lurked within. But as she turned the key in the ignition and tried to start her car, she realized with a sinking feeling that she was out of luck. Her car was dead, and she was stranded in the middle of nowhere with no gas and no way out. With nowhere to run and the darkness closing in around her, Amy huddled in her car, praying for the first light of dawn to chase away the shadows and bring an end to her nightmare. If you liked this video and would like to see more like it, please give it the thumbs up, leave a comment, and click the button to subscribe.